They rush on glorious death and find it sweet to die in battle. Ares figures little in mythology. In one story, he is the lover of Aphrodite, and held up to the contempt of the Olympians by Aphrodite's husband, Hephaestus, but for the most part, he is little more than a symbol of war. He is not a distinct personality, like Hermes or Hera or Apollo. He had no cities where he was worshipped. The Greeks said vaguely that he came from Thrace, home of a rude, fierce people in the northeast of Greece. Appropriately, his bird was the vulture, which, rather than the eagle, some consider to be the air sign, the cardinal air sign of the, this December astrological sign nowadays. But the dog was wronged by being chosen as his animal. Hephaestus, Vulcan, and Mulciber. The entity of fire, sometimes said to be the son of Zeus and Hera, sometimes of Hera alone, who bore him in retaliation for Zeus's having brought forth Athena. Among the perfectly beautiful immortals, he only was ugly, and he was lame as well. In one place in the Iliad, he says that his shameless mother, when she saw that he was born deformed, cast him out of heaven. In another place, he declares that Zeus did this, angry with him for trying to defend Hera. This second story is the better known because of Milton's familiar lines. Mulciber was thrown by angry love, sheer o'er the crystal battlements. From morn to noon he fell, from noon to dewy eve, a summer's day, and with the setting sun, dropped from the zenith like a falling star on Lemnos, the Aegean Isle. And these events, however, were supposed to have taken place in the far distant past. In Homer, he is in no danger of being driven from Olympus. He is highly honored there. The workmen of the immortals, their armor and smith, who makes their dwellings and their furnishings as well as their weapons. In his workshop, he has handmaidens. He has forged out of gold, who can move and who can help him in his work. In the latter poets, his forge is often said to be under this or that volcano, and to cause eruptions. His wife is one of the three Graces in the Iliad, called Aglaia in the Hesiod. In the Odyssey, she is Aphrodite. He was a kindly, peace-loving entity, popular on earth as in heaven. With Athens, he is important in the life of the city. The two were the patrons of handicrafts. The arts, along with agriculture, are the support of civilization. He, the protector of smiths, as she was of the weavers. When children were formally admitted to the city organization, the god of ceremony was Hephaestus. Hestia, or Vesta, she was Zeus's sister. Well, remember, in the polytheist sense of them talking different entities and whatnot, but or perhaps there were entities that said, I'll take over this name of God, and I'll take over this name of God. I'll represent this one, and we'll all be different. We'll all tell the people that we're different gods, right? Anyways, and like Athena and Artemis, a virgin female entity, she has no distinct personality, and she plays no part in the myths. She was, as the female entity of the hearth, the symbol of the home, around which the newborn child must be carried before it could be received into the family. Every meal began and ended with an offering to her. Hestia in all dwellings of men and immortals. Yours is the highest honor, the sweet wine offered first and last at the feast, poured out to you daily. Never without you can those considered to be gods or mortals hold banquet. Each city, too, had a public hearth sacred to Hestia, where the fire was never allowed to go out. If a colony was to be founded, the colonists carried with them coals from the hearth of the mother city, with which to kindle the fire on the new city's hearth. In Rome, her fire was cared for by 6 virgin priestesses called Vestals, the lesser gods of Olympus. There were others considered to be divinities in heavens, besides the 12 great Olympians. The most important of them was that of love, Eros, Cupid in Latin. Homer knows nothing of him, but to Hesiod he is fairest of the deathless gods. In his early stories, he's often a beautiful, serious youth who gives good gifts to men. This idea that the Greeks had of him is best summed up not by a poet, but by a philosopher, Plato. Love, Eros, makes his home in men's hearts, but not in every heart. For where there is hardness, he departs. His greatest glory is that he cannot do wrong nor allow it. Force never comes near him, for all men serve him of their own free will, and he whom love touches not walks in darkness. In the early accounts, Eros was not Aphrodite's son, but merely her occasional companion. In the later poets, he was her son, and almost invariably a mischievous, naughty boy, or worse. Evil his heart, but honey sweet his tongue. No truth in him, the rogue. He is cruel in his play. Small are his hands, yet his arrows fly far as death. Tiny his shaft, but it carries heaven high. Touch not his treacherous gifts, they are dipped in fire. Well, that kind of reminds me of some of the representations of the temperance card. The tarot. He was often represented as blindfolded, because love is often blind. In attendance upon him was Anteros, said sometimes to be the avenger of slighted love, sometimes the one who opposes love, and Himeros, our longing, and Hymen, the entity of the wedding feast. Or, the hoops that they the paper hoops that they break through in football games. Here was the female entity youth, the daughter of Zeus and Hera. Sometimes she appears as a cupbearer to the entity, sometimes that office is held by Ganymede, a beautiful young Trojan prince who was seized and carried up to Olympus by Zeus's eagle. There was no stories about Hebe except that of her marriage to Hercules. Eris was considered to be a goddess of the rainbow and a messenger of the entities. In the Iliad, the only messenger, Hermes, appears first in that capacity in the Odyssey, but he does not take Eris's place. Now the other is called upon by these ones that they consider to be gods. There were also in Olympus 2 bands of lovely sisters, the Muses and the Graces. The Graces were 3: Aglaia, splendor; Euphrosyne, mirth; and Thalia, good cheer. They were the daughters of Zeus and Eurynome, a child of the Titan, Ocean, except in a story of Homer and Hesiod, tell that Aglaia married Hephaestus. They are not treated as separate personalities, but always together, a triple incarnation of grace and beauty. The entities delighted in them when they danced enchantingly to Apollo's lyre, and the man they visited was happy. They gave life its bloom, together with their companions, the Muses. They were queens of song, and no banquets without them could please. The Muses were 9 in number, the daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne. Memory. At first, like the Graces, they were not distinguished from each other. They were all, Hesiod says, of one mind. Their hearts were set upon song, and their spirit is free from care. He is happy whom the Muses love. For though a man has sorrow and grief in his soul, yet when the servant of the Muses sings, at once he forgets his dark thoughts and remembers not his troubles. Such is the holy gift of the Muses to men. In latter times, each had their own special field. Clio was the muse of history, Urania of astronomy, Melpomene of tragedy, Thalia of comedy, Terpsichore of the dance, Calliope of epic poetry, Erato of love poetry, Polyhymnia of songs to the entities, Euterpe of lyric poetry. Hesiod lived near Helicon, one of the Muses' mountains. The others were Pierus and Pieria, where they were born, Parnassus, and of course Olympus. One day the 9 appeared to him, and they told him, "We know how to speak false things that seem true, but we know, when we will, to utter true things." They were companions of Apollo, the entity of truth, as well as of the Graces. Pindar calls the lyre theirs, as well, the harp thing, as well as Apollo's, the golden lyre, to which the dancer's step, listens, owned alike by Apollo and the velvet-wreathed Muses. The man they inspired was sacred far beyond any priest. As the idea of Zeus became loftier, 2 august forms set beside him in Olympus, Themis, which means the right, or divine justice, and Dike, which is human justice, but they never became real personalities. The same was true of the 2 personified emotions esteemed highest of all feelings in Homer and Hesiod. Nemesis, usually translated as righteous anger, and aidos, a difficult word to translate, but in common use among the Greeks, it means reverence and the shame that holds men back from wrongdoing. But it also means the feeling of a prosperous man should have in the presence of the unfortunate, not compassion, but a sense that the difference between him and those poor wretches is not deserved. It does not seem, however, that either Nemesis or Aidos had their home with those considered to be gods. Hesiod says that only when men have finally become completely wicked will Nemesis and Aidos, with their beautiful faces, veiled in white raiment, leave the wide earth and depart to the company of the immortals. From time to time, a few mortals were translated to Olympus, but once they had been brought to heaven, they vanished from literature. Their stories will be told later. the gods of the waters. Poseidon, or Neptune, was lord and ruler of the sea, the Mediterranean, and the Friendly Sea, the Euxine, now the Black Sea. Underground rivers, too, were considered to be his. Ocean, a Titan. Ocean, I'm not sure what it looks like in Greek, so I don't. Was lord of the river Ocean, a great river encircling the earth. His wife, also a Titan, was Tethys. The Oceanides, the nymphs of this great river, were their daughters. The entities of all the rivers on earth were their sons. Pontus, which means deep sea, was a son of Mother Earth and the father of Nereus, a sea entity far more important than he himself was. Nereus was called the Old Man of the Sea, the Mediterranean, a trusty entity and gentle. Hesiod says, "Who thinks just and kindly thoughts and never lies?" His wife was Dorias, a daughter of the ocean. They had 50 lovely daughters, the nymphs of the sea, called Nereids, from their father's name, one of whom, Thetis, was the mother of Achilles, Poseidon's wife. Amphitrite was another. Triton was the trumpeter of the sea. His trumpet was a great shell. He was the son of Poseidon and Amphitrite. Proteus was sometimes said to be Poseidon's son, sometimes his attendant. He had the power both of foretelling the future and of changing his shape at will. The Naiads were also water nymphs. They dwelt in brooks and springs and fountains. Eucothia and her son Palamon, once mortals, became entities of the sea, as did also Glaucus, but all three were unimportant. The Underworld. The kingdom of the dead was ruled by one of the 12 great Olympians, Hades or Pluto, and his queen, Persephone, is often called by his name Hades. It lies, the Iliad says, beneath the secret places of the earth. In the Odyssey, the way to it leads over the edge of the world across the ocean. In latter poets, there are various entrances to it, from the earth through caverns and beside deep lakes. And the ancient Egyptians would have said perhaps, Tupanchienchit is the name. Tartarus and Erebus are sometimes two divisions of the underworld. Tartarus, the deeper of the two, the prison of the sons of earth. Erebus, where the dead pass as soon as they die. Often, however, there is no distinction between the two, and either is used, especially Tartarus, as a name for the entire low region. In Homer, the underworld is vague, a shadowy place, inhabited by its shadows. Nothing is real there. The ghost's existence, if it can be called that, is like a miserable dream. The latter poets define the world of the dead more and more clearly as the place where the wicked are punished and the good rewarded. In the Roman poet Virgil, this idea is presented in great detail, as in no Greek poet. All the torments of the one class and the joys of the other are described in length. Virgil, too, is the only poet who gives clearly the geography of the underworld. The path down to it leads where Acheron, the river of woe, pours into Cocytus, the river of lamentation. An aged boatman named Charon ferries the souls of the dead across the water to the farther bank, where stands the Montine gate to Tartarus. The name Virgil prefers. Charon will receive into his boat only the souls of those upon whose lips the passage money was placed when they died, and who were duly buried. On guard before the gate sits Cerberus, the three-headed dragon-tailed dog, who permits all spirits to enter, but none to return. On his arrival, each one is brought before three judges, Rhadamanthus, Minos, and Aacus, who pass sentence and send the wicked to everlasting torment, and the good to a place of blessedness, called the Elysian Fields. Three other rivers, besides Acheron and Cocytus, separate the underworld from the world above. Phlegethon, the river of fire, Styx, the river of the unbreakable oath, by which the entities swear, and Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. Somewhere in this vast region is Pluto's palace, but beyond saying that it is many-gated and crowded with innumerable guests, no writer describes it. Around it are wide wastes, wan and cold, and meadows of asphodel, presumably strange, pallid, ghostly flowers. We do not know anything more about it. The poets did not care to linger in that gloom-hidden abode. The Erinyes, the Furies, are placed by Virgil in the underworld, where they punish evildoers. The Greek poets thought of them chiefly as pursuing sinners on the earth. They were inexorable, but just. Heraclitus says, not even the sun will transgress his orbit, but the Erinyes, the ministers of justice, overtake him. They were usually represented as three: Tisiphone, Megara, and Alecto. Sleep and Death, his brother, dwelt in the lower world. Dreams, too, ascended from there to men. They passed through two gates, one of horn, through which true dreams went, one of ivory, for false dreams. The lesser gods of Earth. Earth herself was called the All-Mother, but she was not really a divinity. She was never separated from the actual earth and personified. The goddess of the corn, Demeter, Ceres, a daughter of Cronus and Rhea, the entity divine. Dionysus, also called Bacchus. A rewriting of a text about Bacchus became the Gospel of John. Were the supreme divinities of the earth and of great importance in Greek and Roman mythology. Their stories will be found in the next chapter. The other entities who lived in the world were comparatively unimportant. Pan was the chief. He was Hermes' son, a noisy, merry entity. The Homeric hymn in his honor calls him, but he was part animal too, with the goat's horns and goat's hooves instead of feet. He was the goat's herds entity and the sheep herds entity, and also the gay companion, joyous, of the woodland nymphs when they danced. All the wild places were his home, thickets and forests and mountains. But best of all, he loved Arcady, where he was born. He was a wonderful musician. Upon his pipes of reed he played melodies as sweet as the nightingale's song. He was always in love with one nymph or another, but always rejected because of his ugliness. Sounds heard in the wilderness at night by the trembling traveler were supposed to be made by him, so that it is easy to see how the expression panic, fear arise. Silenus was sometimes said to be Pan's son, sometimes his brother, a son of Hermes. He was a jovial, fat old man who usually rode a donkey because he was too drunk to walk. He is associated with Bacchus as well as with Pan. He taught him when the wine entity was young, and is shown by his perpetual darkness. After having his tutor, he became his devoted follower. After being his tutor, became his devoted follower. Besides these entities of the earth, there was a very famous and very popular pair of brothers, Castor and Pollux. Polydeuces, who, in most of the accounts, were said to live half their time on earth and half in heaven. They were the sons of Leda, and are usually represented as being gods, the special protectors of sailors, saviors of swift-going ships when the storm winds rage over the ruthless sea. They were also powerful to save in battle. They were especially honored in Rome, where they were worshipped as the great twin brethren to whom all Dorians pray. Isn't there a mode of music called Dorian? But the accounts of them are contradictory. Sometimes Pollux alone is held to be divine, and Castor a mortal who won a kind of half and half immortality merely because of his brother's love. Leda was the wife of King Tyndareus of Sparta, and the usual story is that she bore two mortal children to him, Castor and Clytemnestra, Agamemnon's wife, and to Zeus, who visited her in the form of a swan. Two others who were immortal, Pollux and Helen, the heroine of Troy. Nevertheless, both brothers, Castor and Pollux, were often called sons of Zeus. Indeed, the Greek name they are best known by, the Dioscuri, means the striplings of Zeus. On the other hand, they were also called sons of Tyndareus, the Tyndarida. They are always